A farmhouse in Georgia, smoke rising from the chimney, chickens in the yard. A garden where someone has been working the soil for years, not abandoned, lived in. A truck pulls up to the gate. A man gets out. He has legal documents in his jacket that say this land belongs to him. He has been gone for 10 years and he has no idea what he is about to walk into. He takes 8 steps up the gravel drive. The front door opens. A small boy appears on the porch, 5 years old, holding a wooden rifle painted red. He plants his feet, points it directly at the man's chest. His voice doesn't waver. "You need to leave right now. This is our house." The man, who has faced things most people will never encounter, raises both hands slowly. And somewhere inside that house, hidden under a floorboard for 10 years, is the reason he can never leave. He hadn't been home in 10 years, not because he couldn't find the road, because he knew exactly where it went. Darnell Aldine had been driving since before sunrise. Georgia rolling past on both sides. Pine trees and red dirt and fence posts leaning the same direction, like they'd all agreed on something years ago and just kept at it out of habit. The sky was that pale early morning color that couldn't decide between gray and gold. Biscuit had his chin on the door handle, back paws hanging off the seat edge, eyes half closed, not sleeping, just present. The way dogs are when they've decided their whole job is to be near you and they're taking it seriously. Darnell hadn't turned on the radio since Min. The silence was fine, better than fine. Silence didn't need anything from him. Silence just sat there and let him drive, which was all he needed from it right now, 38 years old. A duffel bag in the truck bed, a dog who trusted him more than he deserved. And a letter from Carver County folded into the glove compartment that he'd been carrying 4 days without opening a second time, because once had been enough to understand what it meant. Final notice: property tax delinquency, parcel 7703 Aldine Road, Carver County, Georgia. 30 days to settle the outstanding balance, or the county would move to auction. He'd read it twice in a hardware store parking lot in Moan on a Thursday afternoon, sitting on the tailgate eating a sandwich that tasted like the plastic it came wrapped in. Biscuit watching him with that patient look, the one that communicated without any urgency that something was being waited for. He'd given the last of the sandwich to Biscuit and sat there watching a man load sheet metal across the lot, stacking it with the rhythm of someone who had done this 1,000 times and stopped thinking about it long ago. 10 years. He'd been getting letters from that address for 10 years. The ones from the county, the ones from the estate attorney, the ones from a woman named Dolers at the Carver County Records Office whose handwriting slanted left and whose patience somehow made everything worse. He read everyone, folded them back, drove another 200 in whatever direction felt least like backward. He wasn't proud of it. He just couldn't stop doing it until 30 days, until Moan, until he'd run out of directions. So he turned south. The flashback never came gradually. It never did, just a phone ringing in the dark. 3:00 in the morning, his bunk at a naval base in Virginia, sheets still warm, room smelling like floor wax and old coffee. A voice he didn't recognize saying his parents' names. Highway 16, December, black ice. The words impact and instantaneous, and I'm so sorry. He'd sat on the edge of that bunk for a long time. Then he'd gone to the bathroom and held both hands under cold water until they stopped shaking. He never went back to that bunk. 6 weeks later, his service ended. He should have driven south, back to Georgia, back to the farmhouse where he'd grown up, where his mother still had his childhood drawings in the kitchen drawer, where his father's work boots would still be by the back door, shaped to his feet. He should have. Instead, he drove north, then west, took jobs that needed hands and didn't ask questions. Slept in the truck more nights than not. Biscuit came into his life 2 years after a German shepherd from a shelter outside Atlanta who chose Darnell by the simple method of sitting directly on his feet and refusing to move until the paperwork was signed. He kept getting the letters. He kept not answering until a parking lot in Moan, until 30 days, until there was no more road between him and the one place he'd never been able to make himself go back to. Now Georgia, the highway thinning out, fields opening up on both sides. The sky finally making up its mind about gold. Biscuit lifted his head, looked at Darnell, looked at the road, put his chin music back down. I know, Darnell said. He kept driving. Carver County hadn't changed much. A gas station with one pump working. A diner with a hand-painted sign missing the E and open. A post office that looked like it was built in 1943 and painted once since and left alone after that. The kind of small town that exists between bigger towns. People drove through more than they drove to. Darnell pulled in for gas. The woman behind the counter glanced at him, then at Biscuit through the window, then back at Darnell with the look of someone who had been reading strangers for 30 years and kept the results to herself passing through. No, she nodded, didn't push. Small-town people were good at that. They knew when a person's answer meant exactly what it said. He bought coffee, held a cup of water for Biscuit in the parking lot while the dog drank. Then they got back in the truck and turned onto Aldine Road. The road was familiar in the worst way. The way you recognize a song you haven't heard in years. You don't remember knowing it until it starts. And then you know every note, every turn. And some part of you wishes stayed in the parking lot a little longer. The Becca farm on the left with the rusted mailbox. The stand of lobley pines that had grown taller than he remembered. A dip in the road where water collected every winter that his mother used to call the Devil's Puddle because she'd driven into it twice and considered it a personal failing of the road's character. He passed the dip slowly. Biscuit sat up, and then the house came into view. Darnell took his foot off the gas. The truck slowed almost on its own like it understood this required a different speed. Here's the thing about 10 years. When you stay away from a place that long, you build a picture. You can't help it. The mind needs something to hold, so you construct a version. Roof caved in somewhere. Windows gone. Front porch rotted through. 10 years of Georgia summers and nobody home. You prepare yourself for a specific kind of damage. The damage of a place that gave up waiting. He'd built that picture somewhere around Moan. He'd been carrying it all 6 hours. And now it was wrong. The fence was standing, not perfectly, patched in 2 spots with lumber that didn't quite match, but standing. The front door was on its hinges. The porch steps were solid and smoke, thin and steady, rising from the chimney. Not a fire someone just lit. A fire that had been going for hours. A fire that belonged to a morning routine. A chicken coop in the side yard. His parents had never had chickens. This one was uneven, clearly built without a blueprint. But the chickens inside were real and calm and making their unhurried sounds like they'd been there always. A shovel leaning against the oak tree by the driveway, like someone had set it down an hour ago. Darnell stopped the truck at the gate. He sat there. Biscuit looked at him. Yeah, Darnell said. He got out. The gravel under his boots made the same sound it always had, that particular crunch of loose stone over packed dirt. He'd walked this driveway 10,000 times. His feet remembered before his head did. He'd taken maybe 8 steps. Then the front door opened. A woman stepped onto the porch. Late 20s, black natural hair pulled back, flannel shirt with the sleeves rolled up past her elbows. She stood at the top of the steps with her arms at her sides, not crossed, not reaching for anything, just there holding her ground without making a production of it. Behind her, barely visible through the screen door, someone else. Same height, same general shape, watching him with a different quality of attention, more sideways like she was working out angles. Twins. The woman on the porch didn't say hello. She said, "Can I help you?" Not a question, the shape of one. Darnell stopped. Biscuit stopped beside him. "This is my property," Darnell said. "My name is Darnell Aldine. This farm belonged to my parents. The taxes have been delinquent. I'm here to settle them." She didn't react the way people react when they've been caught doing something wrong. Her expression shifted. Something behind her eyes adjusted. But it wasn't guilt. It was the recalibration of someone who has been managing hard situations for a long time and is deciding whether this one qualifies as dangerous. "We've been here 5 years." She said, "We didn't know anyone owned it. I know that. I know you know that." She held his eyes. "I'm DJ Washington. That's my sister Camille inside." The Susans that followed was strange, not hostile, just the quiet of 2 true things sitting in the same space without resolving each other. She hadn't known. He hadn't been here, both facts were real. Neither canceled the other out, Deja, said the voice from inside. Careful, Lo, I see it, Deja said without turning. And then the screen door hit the porch railing with a crack. A small figure came out fast, like something released under pressure. 5 years old, small, absolutely certain of himself. He was carrying a rifle, wooden, roughly made. One end clearly a barrel, one end clearly a stock. The whole thing painted with what appeared to be red nail polish for reasons Darnell chose not to examine right now. The boy planted his feet at the top of the steps, pointed the rifle directly at Darnell's chest. No wobble, completely level. Don't move, the boy said. You need to leave right now. This is our house. Darnell didn't move. Biscuit sat down. Darnell looked at the boy, then at the rifle, then at Ja, who had closed her eyes in the specific way of a person enduring something they cannot prevent. Then back at the boy, Darnell raised both hands. All right, he said. I surrender. The boy blinked. Completely. What does that mean? It means you win. The boy looked at Biscuit, skeptical now, working something out. What about the dog? Biscuit surrenders too. Biscuit on cue lay flat on the gravel with his chin between his front paws. The boy stared at this for a long moment. He had not been expecting full surrender. He was clearly working out what to do with it. Theo, Deja's voice firm. Come inside, but he has papers. He showed me from the driveway. Come inside. Theo lowered the wooden rifle approximately 2 in. Then he looked at Biscuit again. Biscuit thumped his tail once against the gravel. One slow thump, which was apparently sufficient. Theo walked down the steps, sat directly next to Biscuit, placed one hand on the dog's back with the authority of someone who has just been assigned an important function. The tension didn't disappear, but it got smaller, small enough to work around. Darnell reached into his jacket. Both women stiffened slightly, just enough to notice. He slowed his hand, drew out the folded documents, the tax notice, the deed paperwork, the letter from the county recorder, and held them toward DJ without stepping closer. She came down the steps, took them, read without speaking. That kind of composure isn't something you're born with. Music, it's built from years of needing it and not having anything else. She handed the pages to Camille without a word. Camille read faster, looked up at Darnell, looked at Ja. It's real. Camille said, I can see that. Ja. I can see it. Camille handed the documents back to Darnell. We haven't damaged anything, she said. We've repaired things. The roof over the back bedroom was open when we arrived. One window was broken. The porch rail on the left side had pulled away from the post. We fixed everything. I noticed we've grown food on the land. We haven't sold anything from the property itself, only what we've raised and made. I noticed that too. She looked at him for a moment, measuring. You're not what I expected. What did you expect? Someone already on the phone with the sheriff. Darnell folded the documents, put them back inside his jacket. He looked past her at the front door, which stood open. From the driveway, he could see the hallway. The floor swept clean, a coat hook on the wall with a child's jacket and a woman's scarf. His mother had put up that coat hook. He'd stood on a chair beside her, holding the level while she drilled. He was 9 years old. She'd been frustrated with the angle for 3 days before she was satisfied. Something in his chest moved, not painfully, just music moved. I'm not calling anyone, he said. The shoulders dropped a fraction, not relief exactly. The first loosening of something that had been held very tight for a very long time. He stepped up onto the porch, stopped in the doorway. He'd been building readiness for this moment since Moan. Since he turned onto Aldine Road, he'd constructed it carefully. The way you build something that needs to hold weight. It held for about 4 seconds. Then he saw the photograph. Left wall of the hallway, a frame he recognized. Dark wood, slightly oval, the kind his mother had found at a church sale, and refinished herself with a stain that smelled like vinegar for a week. She'd been proud of that frame, told him about it on a phone call like he could see it through the receiver. The photographs inside wasn't one he'd ever seen. His parents standing in front of the farmhouse, younger than he last remembered them. His father, maybe mid-40s, his mother the same. Her kid turned towards something just off camera, caught mid-law. He'd forgotten that laugh. He'd forgotten the shape of it on her face. Beside his parents, slightly to the right, stood a man, 50s, heavy through the shoulders, smiling in the careful way of someone very aware of how they look when they smile. Darnell studied the face. He didn't know it. Not yet, but something registered below the level of recognition. A wrongness he couldn't name because he didn't have enough information to name it yet. He filed it away. "Where did this come from?" he said. Deja came to stand beside him. "We found it under the floorboards in the back bedroom. When we replaced a section of the subfloor that had gone soft, there was a loose board and underneath it several things. That photograph was one of them. You don't know who the man is?" "No, we thought maybe a family friend, someone from before." Darnell looked at the photograph a moment longer. His father didn't hide things. Thomas Aldine was the most straightforward person Darnell had ever known. A farmer, a plain speaker, a man who kept everything in its proper place and said what he meant. He didn't hide things because he'd never thought he had anything that needed hiding. So why was this under a floorboard? He stepped fully into the house. The air didn't carry the stale weight of a place abandoned. Someone had swept the floor, not perfectly, but with care. Boards that should have rotted had been replaced with mismatched lumber that didn't look beautiful, but held solid underfoot. A fire in the wood stove on the kitchen table visible from the hallway. A jar of wild flowers in a coffee can. This wasn't survival by accident. Someone had decided this place was worth keeping and then done the work. He was still standing there when the back door opened. Slow footsteps, unhurried, the sound of someone who moves at their own pace and doesn't apologize for it. An older woman, late 60s, black-white hair cut short and close. Hands that showed decades of use. Not just physical work, but the layered quality of someone who had graded papers and kneaded dough and planted things and turned pages. All of it leaving its mark on the same pair of hands. She carried a basket of garden vegetables, colored greens, sweet potatoes, a few small onions with roots still attached. She stopped when she saw Darnell. He stopped looking at the hallway. They looked at each other and she said, "You have your mother's eyes, not your mother's name." Not "I knew your parents, just the eyes." As if that was the essential fact and everything else could follow in its own time. Darnell didn't answer immediately. He'd heard that all his life. Relatives at the funeral, his father's old friends. The woman at the hardware store in Carver who sold seeds packs to his mother every spring. Jeanette's eyes, they always said he hadn't heard it in 10 years. He'd forgotten how it landed. "You knew her." He said, "We taught at the same school." The woman set her basket on the hallway table. "Carver County Elementary, not at the same time. She was there before I started, but she came back once for a book fair. We met maybe 3 times total." A pause. "I recognized you from a photograph she kept on her desk at the school. I found it in storage about 4 years ago, going through old boxes." She extended her hand. "Eloise Carter. Everyone calls me Miss Eloise." He shook it. "Darnell Aldine, I know who you are." Simply without drama. She kept that photo for years. He didn't know what to say to that. Neither did she for a moment. Then Miss Eloise picked up her basket and walked to the kitchen like she'd been doing it for years because it turned out she had been. They sat at the kitchen table. All of them. Deja across from Darnell, arms on the table, meeting his eyes directly. Camille beside her sister, watching him with that sideways attention, still calculating. Miss Eloise at the end already filling the kettle without asking. Theo on the floor next to Biscuit, wooden rifle across his knees. On standby in case things went wrong again, Darnell looked at each of them in turn. Then he said, "Tell me." Deja looked at Camille. Camille looked at Deja. 4 seconds of conversation without a single word. The kind siblings developed from living through the same thing so many times that words become unnecessary. Deja turned back to Darnell and started music, talking. 5 years ago, Ja and Camille had been moving through Georgia the way people move when there's no center left to orbit. Seasonal work. Motel rooms when the money held. Camille's car when it didn't. DJ was 3 months pregnant. The man who should have been part of that had looked at the situation, done a quick calculation, and found a reason to leave. Their foster father had been more direct. Get out was what he said. Not in anger exactly, more like he'd been waiting for a reason. And here one finally was. Camille had taken Ja's hand and walked out with her November. Cold the way Georgia November is cold, not dramatic, just relentless. 2 weeks in the car, then a shelter in Milledgeville with not enough beds and a 30-day maximum stay policy. Then back in the car. Then Camille had driven up Aldine Road one evening, looking for a field entrance where they could park out of sight from the highway. And she'd seen the farmhouse dark in every window, gate hanging open, weeds working their way up the porch steps. She drove past it twice, then she turned in. We checked, DJ said. Music, we knocked. We waited 2 days before we tried the door. The lock was already broken. Not defensive, Camille said, just accurate. We weren't going to stay. Just stopped. Started again. Just until we figured out what came next. But then Theo came, born in this house with Miss Aloyse's help. She'd been living 3 me down Aldine Road at the music time, renting a small house from a neighbor. She arrived with a casserole the first week, and then stayed when it became clear that no one was going to a hospital and someone needed to be there. After Theo music, leaving felt impossible in a different way. So they stayed. They fixed the roof, patched the broken window, built the chicken coop out of salvage lumber and the stubbornness that comes from having no other options. They planted, learned what the land would give and what it wouldn't. Tried again the following season. Miss Aloyse had driven over regularly in those early years, helping with Theo, sharing what she grew in her own garden. 6 months ago, when her landlord sold the rental property and the next available place was 3 months out, Ja had simply said, "There's a room." No ceremony, just music, there's a room. Darnell listened to all of it without interrupting. When people explain themselves mid-story, it's never really about you. It's about them needing the discomfort to stop. He let them finish. Then he was quiet. Biscuit had moved from the floor to lean against Darnell's leg under the table. Theo had migrated from the floor to lean against Biscuit. The wooden rifle rested against the wall. Stood down. "You said you found things under the floorboard," Darnell said. Deja nodded. "What else was there?" Camille got up without speaking. Came back from the back room with a small cardboard box, set it on the table. Darnell looked at it, not at the box itself, at the handwriting on the side. His father's handwriting, precise, slightly tilted right. The printing of a man who taught himself to write clearly and never quite made it to cursive. "Darnell, when you're ready." Darnell looked at that for a long moment. "You didn't open it," he said. "No," Deja said. "Neither of you?" "No." He pulled the box toward him. Without planning it, everyone found somewhere else to be. Camille went to check the back rooms. Deja moved Theo to the far end of the table with a drawing project, his back turned, head bent. Miss Aloyse set a cup of tea near Darnell's elbow and walked out of the kitchen without a word. Just the box, just him. He sat with it for a full minute before he touched anything. The kitchen smelled like wood smoke and something baked earlier in the day. A smell that reached back past 10 years of parking lots in gas station coffee and motel rooms. Back to mornings that had seemed ordinary at the time and only revealed themselves as something else after they were gone. He opened the box, a photograph, his parents in their mid-30s, standing in front of the farmhouse the year they bought it. The oak tree barely taller than his father's shoulder. Both of them looking at the camera with the faces of people who have just done something terrifying and are trying not to look like they have his father's watch. A bova with a leather strap repaired once with electrical tape because the tape worked fine. And that was that. The crystal cracked in one corner, his own birth announcement printed from a home computer. Thomas and Janet Aldine are pleased to announce 8 4 O's, and in the margin in his father's handwriting already causing trouble. A small notebook navy blue cover. Hardware store variety $2. His father had kept them for years. Feed schedules, repair lists, weather notes, the working record of an ordinary farming life. Darnell turned through the pages. Fence repair February, seed order March, water pump gasket, June. Page after page of plain documentation of a life that knew what it was and didn't need to be anything else. He nearly closed it. Then he turned to the last page. 2 lines written heavier than everything else on every other page. The pen pressed down, the letters deliberate. The writing of a man who needed to be certain something would be read. Raymond, $47,000. Do not sign anything he gives you, not anything, whatever he says. No date, no explanation, just the name, the number, the warning. Darnell read it 3 times. Then he set the notebook down and looked at the wall. His father was not a man who wrote warnings in the backs of notebooks. His father was not a man who hid things under floorboards. His father was not a man who left boxes labeled with his son's name in case something happened. Except apparently he had been all of those things. He'd done it without telling Darnell, without calling, without any of the usual methods a man uses to get a message to his son. He'd done it this way. Box under the floor, name on the side when you're ready, which meant he'd known. He'd known something might happen. He'd known enough to prepare for it, and what had happened was Highway 16, black ice. The words impact and instantaneous. Darnell closed the notebook. He sat in the kitchen with the sound of Theo's pencil at the far end of the table with Biscuit's slow breathing against his leg. With the chickens outside being peacefully indifferent to all of it. He thought about a name he hadn't heard before today. Raymond Pewitt, $47,000, not anything. That evening after dinner, Darnell went back to the photograph on the hallway wall. The man beside his parents, heavy through the shoulders, that careful smile. Darnell looked at that face for a long time. He still didn't know the name, but he had the feeling, the one that had registered when he first saw it. Below recognition, a wrongness he'd filed away. He had a name now, Raymond Pewitt. He didn't know yet what connected the name to the face. He didn't know what the $47,000 meant or why his father had written the warning with that kind of weight. He didn't know what this man had to do with a box under a floorboard and a photograph hidden alongside it. But he was going to find out. That was the first clear thought he'd had in 10 years that pointed somewhere specific. Darnell slept in the truck that night, not because there wasn't space. Deja had offered the couch without quite meeting his eyes, which was its own kind of grace. The offer was genuine, but the house was small. The situation was strange. Nobody needed a man they'd known for 7 hours sleeping in the next room. He thanked her and said the truck was fine. It was fine. He'd slept in it enough nights that the cab had its own familiarity. The angle of the headrest, music. The way Biscuit arranged himself across the passenger seat when he was off duty. The sound Georgia wind made against the side windows when it came across open fields at night. He'd loved that sound as a kid and not thought about it once in 10 years. He lay on his back looking up at the ceiling of the cab, the notebook on his chest, music one hand resting on Biscuit's side. Raymond Pewitt, the man in the photograph, standing beside his parents with that prepared smile. His father's warning pressed deep enough to read from the other side of the page. Around 2:00 in the morning, the back door of the farmhouse opened. Footsteps on the porch. Not coming toward the truck, just someone standing outside in the dark. The way people do when the inside of a house gets too small for whatever they're carrying, Darnell lay still. After a few minutes, the footsteps went back in. The door closed. He thought about his mother in the photograph. Her head turned towards something just off camera. Caught midlaw. The laugh he'd heard 1,000 times growing up and had completely forgotten the sound of until he saw the shape of it on her face today. Music that was the thing about 10 years of not going back. You lost things in pieces quietly without noticing, not all at once. One by one, the way you lose small objects during a long move until one day you reach for something you were certain you had, and it simply isn't there. He'd lost the sound of his mother's laugh without knowing it was gone. Darnell pressed the heel of one hand against his mouth, breathed through whatever came up. Let it move, don't hold it, don't chase it, just let it move. He lowered his hand. Biscuit stirred, resettled, put his chin on Darnell's arm. The wind came back across the fields. Low and steady, morning came without ceremony. Gray first. Then the slow accumulation of pale gold that passes for spring light in the county. Not arriving so much as building, Darnell was up at 5. Old habit, the kind installed so deep it stops being a choice and becomes simply what your body does when the duck starts thinning. He walked the full property before the house stirred. Not inspecting, not making lists, just walking, getting the measure of ground he'd grown up on but hadn't touched in a decade. Relearning it the way you relearn a language you once knew. Not by studying, but by moving through it until the shapes come back. The east fence needed work. 3 sections down, one post gone soft at the base, the whole run pulling with it. He'd fixed that first. The greenhouse behind the house stopped him for a full 5 minutes. He stood at the edge of it in the early light and just looked. Salvage lumber for the frame. Plastic sheeting in 2 layers with a deliberate gap between them. A low-tech insulation approach that required real thought to arrive at raised beds, inside made from materials sourced from at least 4 different places, but fitted together with enough care that they held seedlings already growing. Calids, onions, the beginnings of something that looked like beans. His mother had grown tomatoes in this spot. One summer she tried peppers and declared them a personal insult, and then tried again the following year out of principle and been insulted again. He stood there and let himself remember that. Then he went to find the post hole digger. Breakfast happened the way things happen when people share a kitchen without a system. Miss Alois was at the stove when Darnell came in from outside, making eggs without consulting anyone on preferences. She made enough for 5 and set the plates out with the efficiency of someone who has fed other people for so long it requires no thought. Camille appeared from the hallway, hair still damp, already dressed. She sat across from Darnell, poured coffee, looked at the eggs, looked at him. "Are you staying?" "No build-up, no softening for now," Darnell said. "What does that mean?" "It means I don't know yet." Camille wrapped both hands around her mug. "Fair." That was the whole conversation, which Darnell appreciated more than he could have explained. Because it was exactly the right number of words for 6:30 in the morning when nobody had any answers, Deja came in with Theo on her hip. Clearly a temporary arrangement. He was already too big for it, but some mornings apparently required the altitude. She set him down, handed him toast, looked at Darnell. "If you're here today," she said, "the east fence needs fixing and the drain behind the greenhouse is backing up. Not a request, not an order, just here is what the land needs. Take it or leave it." "I'll start with the fence," Darnell said. Theo from his corner had been watching this exchange with complete seriousness. Then he looked at Biscuit, stationed by the refrigerator in his morning position of focused optimism. "Biscuit," Theo said. Music. Biscuit's ears went up. "You're on patrol." Darnell looked at Biscuit. Biscuit looked at Darnell. "He's right," Darnell said. Miss Alois made a sound from the stove that she covered quickly. It fooled nobody. The fence took most of the morning. Darnell dug out the soft post, measured, cut a replacement from the lumber stack in the barn. Different ages, different sources. Clearly gathered over years from wherever wood could be found. He set the new post in concrete mixed in a bucket hanging on the barn wall, worked the wire back up to tension, moved to the next weak section. Biscuit sat 10 ft away, watching with focused attention. At 9, Theo appeared, binoculars around his neck, a stick he was using as a walking staff, and on his right hand, one of Miss Alois's oven mitts. "I'm ready," Theo said. "For what?" "Patrol." Darnell kept working the wire. "What's your patrol area?" "The perimeter." Darnell had said fence line, but perimeter was a legitimate upgrade. "South perimeter first. Stay where I can see you." Theo lifted the binoculars, scanned south, scanned north, looked at Darnell. "What am I looking for? Anything that shouldn't be there? What music should be there? Fields, fence, birds." "What if there's a person? Come tell me." Theo music went. For the next hour, he moved along the south fence with the seriousness of someone who has been given a real assignment and intends to honor it. He stopped 3 times to crouch and examine something on the ground. Once he found a feather large, brown-tipped, curved, he brought music it back. "Hawk," Darnell said without looking up from the wire. Theo examined the feather again with this new information, music, then turned and went back to his route. Darnell kept working, and the thing was it helped. Not Theo specifically, not the patrol specifically. Just the uncomplicated presence of someone who needed something simple was, and was completely satisfied when you gave it. Darnell hadn't realized how long it had been since anyone had asked him for something that easy to provide. Music. He was clearing the drainage ditch behind the greenhouse that afternoon when the clean, dark sedan turned up the driveway. A man. Music got out. 50s heavy through the shoulders, blue suit, shoes that cost more than a week of Darnell's repair work. Music. He walked toward the house with the ease of someone accustomed to arriving places and being welcomed. Deja was already on the porch. Darnell sat down his tools and walked around the side of the house. The man saw him, smiled, extended his hand. "Mr. Aldine, I heard you were back in town. Raymond Pewitt. I've had some interest in this property for a while now, and I thought." Darnell looked at the man's face and it hit him. Not just the name from the notebook, the face, the photograph on the hallway wall, his parents standing in front of the house, his mother Midlaw, the man to their right, heavy through the shoulders. That specific careful smile, exactly this smile, Darnell let him finish. Whatever Pewitt was saying about market value and tax situations and resources to help resolve things quickly. Then he said, "I'm not selling." Pewitt's smile adjusted, stayed in place but adjusted. "I understand it's a lot to take in. I don't need an answer today." "I'm not selling a beat." Pewitt looked at the house, then back at Darnell. "Well, the smile one more time. You know where to find me." He walked back to his car, got in, drove away. Darnell watched until the car was gone. Then he stood in the gravel driveway a moment longer, his father's warning sitting in his chest like a stone he'd swallowed. "Do not sign anything he gives you, not anything." He went back to the drainage ditch. The list needed to keep moving, but his mind was already somewhere else entirely. That night, Darnell sat at the kitchen table with the notebook open in front of him. 2 lines, heavy ink. His father's hand, Theo, was asleep. Camille was in her room. Miss Alois had gone to the back of the house, and from down the hallway came the low sound of the radio playing softly. The late gospel hour. Des stood at the kitchen counter with her back to him, washing out the coffee pot, not talking, not needing to fill the air. After a while, she said without turning around, "He's been here before." Darnell looked up. Pewitt once about 8 months ago said he was doing research on agricultural land values in the county. Asked if we'd seen any county notices on the property. She set the pot down. "We hadn't. He left a card. We didn't call. Did he say anything else?" "He asked how long we'd been here. He asked if we knew who owned it." She turned around, then looked at Darnell directly. "He already knew who owned it." Darnell didn't say anything for a moment. "He knew you were coming." Deja said, "Yeah, before you even got here." "Yeah." She looked at him, at the notebook on the table, at his face, reading something in it. The way certain people learn to read what's happening underneath what's being shown. Years of having to years of watching for what was coming before it arrived. "What's in the notebook?" She said, a warning. "My father wrote it. Last entry different from all the others. His name, a number, and a warning not to sign anything he gives me. Your father knew him, knew something about him." Deja looked at the table. Then she said simply, "Okay, just that one word." But the way she said it, flat and forward-facing like someone already turning toward what comes next, told Darnell that she wasn't going anywhere. That whatever this was, she would stand in it with him. Not because she owed him anything, but because this house had been her home for 5 years, and she was done being the kind of person who waited to be told what was happening in her own home. She folded the dish towel over the oven handle, turned off the kitchen light, walked down the hallway. Darnell sat alone at the table. The wood stove ticked softly. Biscuit exhaled from the floor. Outside, the Georgia night was wide and dark, stars coming out over the fields. More of them every minute as the last light drains in from the west. His father's farm, his father's warning, his father's name on a box left under a floor, "When you're ready." He hadn't been ready for 10 years. He was here now. He didn't know yet what that meant. But for the first time since the parking lot, since he turned the truck south and pointed it toward the one place he'd been circling for a decade. For the first time in all of that, he wasn't thinking about leaving. He was thinking about what needed to happen next. He closed the notebook, put it in his jacket pocket, got up, washed his cup, turned off the last light, walked out to the truck, lay back, looked at the ceiling, Biscuit settled. Tomorrow there was more fence to fix. The drainage ditch behind the greenhouse wasn't finished. The east gate still needed a new hinge. And somewhere in Carver County, Raymond Pewitt was sleeping with a smile that had been prepared in advance. Darnell looked at the ceiling for a long time. Then he closed his eyes. The road ended here. He just didn't know yet what that meant for the road after. It appeared before sunrise. Darnell saw it when he walked out to the truck at 5:40 in the morning. A square yellow placard zip tied to the front gate post. Official-looking, printed clean, bold, black letters on yellow background. Ownership contested inquiry pending Carvison records. He stood in front of it in the cold morning dark. Read it once. Then he looked closer. No case number, no filing date, no office address, no phone number that would connect to an actual government building. Just the look of legitimacy without any of the substance underneath it. Like a suit with nothing inside it. Like a smile prepared in advance. Well-made theater, music, expensive theater designed to be seen by neighbors. By the people who bought eggs from Camille at the Saturday market on Cedar Street. By anyone driving past Aldine Road who might think twice about whether this was land they wanted to be associated with. Darnell unzipped the zip ties with his pocket knife, took the sign, walked to the truck, set it on the passenger seat. Biscuit sniffed it once, looked at Darnell. "I know," Darnell said. He backed out of the driveway and pointed the truck toward town. Sheriff Curtis Haynes' office occupied the east end of the Carver County Municipal Building on Main Street. Music, one of those brick buildings from the 1940s that had been added onto twice and painted over 3 times, and still managed to look exactly like what it was. A place where official things happened at official speeds. The waiting area chairs had not been replaced since approximately 1987 and showed no signs of being replaced anytime soon. Darnell had called ahead from the truck. Haynes had said, "Come in." Haynes was at his desk when Darnell arrived. He stood when Darnell came through the door. And here was the thing. He knew who Darnell was before Darnell said his name. Music, it was visible in the way Haynes looked at him. Recognition with something behind it, not just familiarity, something older, something that had been waiting. "Sit down," Haynes said. Darnell sat. Haynes was 55, built like someone who had been strong at 30 and kept himself functional without making it a project. Gray at the temples, more gray coming. A face shaped by decades of knowing more than he could act on. The weight of a man who has had to sign his name to conclusions he didn't fully believe. Darnell set the fake sign on the desk. Haynes looked at it. "I didn't issue this," he said. "I know it's not county material. I know that too." Haynes set it aside, leaned music back, looked at Darnell. The way a man looks at something he's been waiting for and isn't entirely glad has finally arrived. Then he said, "I knew your father, I heard. We didn't run in the same circles much as adults, different lives. But I respected Thomas Aldine." A pause. He was the kind of man who meant what he said. "I don't meet many of those." Darnell waited because there was more. He could feel the more sitting in the room between them. Haynes opened the bottom drawer of his desk, took out a manila folder, set it on the desk between them. Didn't open it. "I signed the accident report," Haynes said. "Highway 16, 10 years ago, December." The room got quiet in the way rooms get when something important is being laid on a table. "Brake failure," Darnell said. That's what the report says. That's what the report says. A beat. Is that what you believe?" Haynes didn't answer immediately. He looked at the folder. The car was serviced 4 days before the accident. He said one shop within 30 mi at the time. Carver County Automotive on Route 9. Owner was a man named Deshaun Vickers. Good reputation. 11 years in business. He stopped. Vickers sold his stake 8 months after the accident. Relocated to Alabama, I tried to reach him twice in the 2 years after. Neither attempt went anywhere. Darnell looked at the folder. "Who bought Vickers's stake?" he said. Haynes looked at him steadily. "You have a name already. I want to hear yours." "Raymond Pewitt," Haynes said. "Bought 40% of that shop 14 months before the accident. I found that out 2 years after the fact, going through old business filings on something completely unrelated. By then, Vickers was gone. The shop had changed hands twice more. Physical records long since disposed of in the normal course of business. He let that sit. I couldn't close the accident investigation, couldn't reopen it either. What I had was a connection that looked wrong and a chunk in 3 places. But you kept the file. I kept it." Darnell looked at the manila folder, thought about the notebook in his jacket pocket. His father's handwriting pressed deep into the last page. The name, the number, the warning. "What was the $47,000, he said. Haynes frowned. "Where does that number come from?" Darnell told him. The notebook, the last entry, the name and the number and the warning written heavy enough to press through to the next page. Haynes listened without interrupting. Then he was quiet for a long moment. Your father came to see me, he said, about 11 months before the accident. Said someone had approached him about a land development deal in the county. Raymond Pewitt was brokering it. Said the numbers didn't hold up. He declined, but the approach hadn't stopped. Did he tell you about money Pewitt owed him? He mentioned a previous arrangement that had gone sour. Didn't give specifics. Said he had documents he was keeping somewhere safe in case things escalated. A pause. I told him to be careful, that's all I did. I told him to be careful and I had nothing concrete, and a year later I was signing his accident report. They sat with that an old regret and a newer one in the same room. He left a box for me. Darnell said under the floorboards, my name on the outside, the photo, the watch, the notebook. He knew something might happen. He prepared for it. And you weren't here to find it. No, Haynes picked up the fake sign, turned it over, set it back down. Pewitt has been circling this property since your parents died. He knows how to wait, knows how to apply pressure that's hard to trace. He looked at Darnell steadily. He made you an offer yesterday. I said no. He won't stop at no. I know he'll find a pressure point. He usually does. Darnell stood, picked up his jacket. Then I need to find the documents my father kept, the ones he mentioned to you. Do you know where they are? Not yet, but I know who has them. He looked at Haynes, the attorney who handled the estate after the accident. I found the name in the letters I'd been carrying. Firm closed years ago, but the attorney is still in the county. I called him last night. What did music he say? Come in the morning. Haynes stood as well. When you have what you need, come back here first. Before you do anything else, you'll be here. I've been waiting 10 years to have something real to work with. Haynes met his eyes. I'm not going anywhere. Darnell got halfway down the front steps of the municipal building before he stopped. He stood there in the cold morning air, not moving, just standing, looking at the street, the parking lot. The ordinary Carver County morning, going about its business on the other side of the building. He pressed one hand flat against the stair railing, breathed music. Once. 14 months before the accident, Raymond Pewitt had purchased a 40% stake in the only garage that serviced his parents' car. Music 4 days before the accident, that car was brought in for service. 8 months after 2 people died on a road that car had traveled, the garage owner sold everything and left the state. And 19 days after the funeral, 19 days, Pewitt had filed a purchase intent application on the Aldine property. Darnell pressed his hand harder against the railing. Let it be what it was. Then he walked to the truck. He came back to the farm in the early afternoon, found Digger in the greenhouse, hands in the soil, transplanting seedlings from starting trays into the raised beds. She didn't look up when he came in, just kept working. The man in the photograph, she said, Pewitt it. He had something to do with the accident, music not a question. Circumstantial, Darnell said. For now, he owned him part of the garage. It serviced the car. The mechanic sold out and disappeared 8 months after. Haynes has had the file for 10 years with nothing to work with. Deja moved to the next seedling, pressed the soil around the base with 2 fingers. What do you need? Documents my father kept with an attorney. I'm going to Savannah in the morning. She looked up, then held his eyes for a moment, then went back to the seedlings. I'll have coffee ready before you leave, she said. That evening, Camille spread papers across the kitchen table, not asked, not announced. She'd simply been gone most of the day and come back with a folder under her arm, and now the table was covered. Darnell sat across from her. Deja stood at the counter. I've been at the county records office, Camille said, looking at land transaction history. This parcel and the surrounding ones, she pushed the first sheet toward Darnell. It started with 7 families, that's what I thought. This morning, she pushed a second sheet. It's not 7. Another sheet, it's 14. Going back 18 years, Darnell looked at the papers. Camille's handwriting ran down the left margin of each page in a clean vertical list. Names, dates, parcel numbers, transaction types. She had constructed a timeline without being asked, organized it without announcing what she was doing, and laid it out with the flat precision of someone who processes the world through patterns and finds the pattern before anyone else knows to look for one. 3 families lost their land completely, she said. Foreclosure. After a land development agreement failed to generate the promised returns which it was designed to do, she turned a page over and slid it toward him. "Read that paragraph." Darnell read it, then read it again. The profit-sharing clause in the development contract was built on a threshold, a revenue threshold that by the definitions constructed elsewhere in the same document would never be met, not through obvious fraud, through language. Definitions nested inside definitions. Conditions written to appear reasonable on a first read and become impossible on a third. 7 other families had signed. 11 had lost something. 3 had lost everything. Thomas Aldine had refused to sign, and 13 months later, Highway 16. Darnell set the page down, looked at the table, looked at the list of names. The holding company that brokered all 14 transactions, Camille said, changed its registered name 3 times, but the listed principals are the same across every filing. She put her finger on one name at the bottom of the last page. Raymond Pewitt. The kitchen was quiet. Thea was already asleep. Miss Alois had gone to the back room with her library book, just the 3 of them, the table full of papers, the wood stove doing its low, steady work. Deja looked at Darnell. Darnell looked at the list of names, 14 families in Carver County, 18 years. His father had been one of them, the one who said no. And then 13 months after saying no, Thomas Aldine had stopped existing on any road at all. "There's a woman named Rita Eccles on this list." Camille said, third one from the bottom. "She lost her farm 8 years ago. I know that name," DJ said quietly. "She waits tables at the diner on Seta Street. She told me once she never understood the foreclosure. Thought she'd made every payment. She had made every payment." Camille said the development revenue she was counting on never came because it was designed not to. Nobody said anything for a moment. Then Darnell stood up, picked up the list of names, folded it carefully, put it in his jacket pocket next to his father's notebook. "I'm leaving for Savannah at 4:30, he said. "When I come back, I need this whole package organized. Every transaction, every name, everything you have." Camille nodded. "Once already planned," she said. "He left before the valley, woke up 4:40 in the morning, sky still fully dark, no gray yet. Just stars going hard above the fields the way they go out here, away from town, where nothing competes with them." Darnell had the truck running and the heater going before anyone in the house stirred, except he came back inside for the thermos he'd forgotten on the counter. And Deja was there standing in the kitchen doorway in a flannel shirt and wool socks holding a travel mug of coffee she'd clearly made while he was outside starting the truck. She held it out. He took it. Their fingers almost touched. Almost. The gap between almost and actually is its own kind of statement. "Savannah," she music said. "Savannah back before dark." Before dark, she looked at him for a moment past the point where the exchange required it. Not long, but long enough to be deliberate. "Drive careful," she said. He drove careful. The highway south was empty at that hour. Just Darnell and a biscuit and the headlights working through the dark. Georgia in early spring before dawn looks like a landscape still deciding what it wants to be. The hills shapeless, the trees just vertical suggestions, the road the only solid committed thing. Darnell drank the coffee Deja had made and thought about attorney Wendell Ackhaffer. He'd found him 4 days ago, 40 minutes of searching on his phone in the cab of the truck after Ethio had gone to sleep and the house had gone quiet. The firm had dissolved years back, but Ackhaffer himself hadn't gone far. Retired attorneys in small states tend not to. They move to quieter offices, take on music less. The work becomes more selective, but it doesn't stop. Darnell had called at 8:00 in the evening. 4 music rings, then a man's voice, direct, unhurried. "Ackhaffer, my name is Darnell Aldine." Janet Aldine was my mother. A silence, not the silence of someone caught off guard. The silence of someone who has been waiting for a particular thing to happen and is taking a breath to acknowledge that it has. "I wondered when you'd call." "Ackhaffer said she left documents with you." "She did. Come in the music morning. I'll have everything ready." That was the whole call. Darnell had gone to bed after and slept. Actually slept 3 solid hours, which surprised him the way small graces do when you stopped expecting them a long time ago. Now, Savannah, 2 hours south. Biscuit had his chin on the window frame, music, ears moving in the air coming through the gap. The county Darnell had grown up in giving way to the highway, and then to the city spreading out ahead. Attorney Wendell Ockafer's office was on the second floor above a hardware store on a side street off Savannah's main corridor. Exterior stairs on the side of the building, a door with frosted glass. Inside, 2 windows, a desk, bookshelves from floor to ceiling, and a coffee maker that had clearly been running without interruption for a significant portion of the decade. Ockafer himself was 72, thin white hair worn close, eyes sharp in the way of someone who has spent 50 years reading contracts and understanding what the words are actually saying underneath the words they appear to be saying. He stood when Darnell came in, looked at him. "You have your father's jaw," he said, "and your mother everywhere else. I've heard that," Darnell said. "Sit down," Darnell sat. Biscuit settled beside the chair and put his chin on Darnell's boot. Ockafer went to the bookshelf. Not a filing cabinet, an actual shelf organized by a system only he could read. He found what he needed in under a minute. A red accordion folder, thick, held together with a rubber band gone brittle with age. He set it on the desk between them. "Your mother brought this to me a little over 10 years ago," he said, "about 4 months before the accident on Highway 16. Darnell looked at the folder. 4 months. She had been here 4 months before Highway 16. His mother preparing for something she hoped would never happen. "She came alone," Ockafer continued. "She didn't tell your father she was coming, which she mentioned, and which I noted." He paused. "She said there were things she needed in safekeeping with someone she trusted. She trusted me because I'd handled a previous matter for your family. A boundary dispute with a neighboring property some years earlier. Minor, but she remembered." He looked at Darnell evenly. "She also said that if anything happened to her or your father before she came back for the documents, I was to hold everything until you came for it." She said that specifically. Specifically, she said, "Hold it for Darnell, he'll come when he's ready." A pause. "It took some time." It did. She said that too, that it would take time, no judgment in it. Just the fact of it laid flat. She knew you. Darnell looked at the folder. He opened it slowly. His mother had been a teacher for 28 years. She knew how to create order for a specific reader. She knew how to arrange information so that someone coming to it without any prior knowledge could follow from beginning to end and arrive at understanding rather than confusion. She had prepared this for a specific reader. She had prepared it for him. The original property deed, the land transfer documents from when his parents purchased the farm, clean, complete. His parents' signatures legible. The county stamp intact, no ambiguity, no gap that a patient man with resources could wedge open. His father's will, properly drawn, properly witnessed, everything to Darnell. With one provision. The farmhouse was not to be sold within the first 5 years of inheritance and was to be maintained as a family home during that period. The 5-year restriction had lapsed. Darnell was a decade past it, but the will itself was valid and the ownership was unambiguous. Then the other documents, a promissory note dated 14 years ago, signed by Raymond Pewitt, acknowledging a personal debt of $47,000 owed to Thomas Aldine, repayable within 3 years attached to it. A letter from Pewitt requesting an extension on repayment dated 13 years ago. A second letter 12 years ago, another extension requested. And finally, a letter from his father, formal, brief, dated 13 months before the accident stating that no further extensions would be granted, that the matter would be referred to legal counsel within 60 days if payment was not received. 60 days. 13 months before Highway 16, Darnell set the promissory note down. Picked up the next document, a land development agreement. 14 years ago, Pewitt's holding company, operating under a name Darnell didn't recognize, had been brokering a development scheme in Carver County. A proposal to build mixed residential and commercial property on agricultural land. Multiple landowners approached. Thomas Aldine had been one of them. The agreement would have transferred partial development rights to Pewitt's company in exchange for a promised share of future profits projected to be substantial. His father had refused to sign. Darnell read the agreement carefully, all of it. Then he read it again. The profit-sharing clause, the thresholds, the definitions nested inside definitions, the conditions constructed to appear reasonable and become impossible. His father had seen it, had refused, had gone back to Pewitt about the 47,000, had made a final demand. Pay what you owe in 60 days or face legal action. A man with a fraudulent scheme in progress, a creditor threatening to drag him into court. 13 months later, Highway 16, December, black ice. Darnell set the dock occupants down. The room was quiet except for the coffee maker doing something thermal in the corner. She knew, Darnell said. She figured it out. Okafor said she went through the development agreement line by line and traced the language back. Then she found the loan records and underserved what the demand letter meant in context. A pause. She was planning to bring everything to the county attorney. She came to me to make sure the documents survived in case something happened before she got there. Something happened before she got there. 4 months between when she came to me and the accident. Yes. Darnell looked at the documents on the desk. Everything his father had tried to protect by refusing to sign. Everything his mother had quietly, carefully assembled and carried to a man she trusted in a second-floor office above a hardware store. Left there for him for whenever he found his way back. Already made copies, he said. The first set 5 years ago when it seemed like you might not come. Then again last year, keeping things current, Darnell looked at the man. Thank you, he said. Okafor waved it off. The gesture of someone who doesn't want thanks for doing what was simply right and a long time overdue. One more music thing, Okafor said. He opened the center drawer of his desk, took out a small envelope, white-sealed Darnell's name on the front in his mother's handwriting. Music, that particular forward tilt the way she crossed her T's with a slight leftward hook, she'd never corrected because she didn't think it needed correcting. Music, she left this separately from the documents. Okafor said it was personal, said I'd know when to give it to you. He set the envelope on top of the folder. I think this is when Darnell picked up the folder and the envelope, tucked them under his arm, shook Okafor's hand. Your father was a man who did the right thing when it cost him something. Okafor said that's rarer than it should be. Darnell shook the hand, didn't answer that. Some things you can't answer without your voice, doing something you don't want it to do in front of a man you've just met. He walked out, sat in the truck for 10 minutes before he started it. Biscuit put his chin on Darnell's arm. Darnell opened the envelope, 3 sentences. His mother had never used more words than something required. I know you think leaving was wrong. It wasn't. Coming back is right. Those are different things. The house is big enough for more than just memory. Fill it. I love you, Mom. He read it twice. Then he pressed the letter flat against the steering wheel. Both hands held it there for a moment. Let the moment be what it was. Just a man in a truck holding a letter his mother wrote more than 10 years ago in a second-floor office in Savannah, because she loved her son enough to prepare for the worst and leave him something soft to land on. When he finally got there, he folded the letter carefully, put it inside his jacket against his music chest, started the truck. He was pulling out of the parking space onto the street when his phone rang. Camille, music. He picked up on the first ring healed. She said, no greeting, straight to it. Tell me. Music, quiet, title, action. This morning while you were in Savannah, he's claiming ownership is disputed and requesting a court-ordered review. Her voice was controlled and flat, the way it got when she was managing something much larger than she wanted to show. If it goes unchallenged, it freezes any ownership confirmation and ties the property in process for months, long enough for him to find another angle. Darnell merged onto the northbound highway, pointed the truck toward Carver County. He filed this morning because he knew you'd left. Camille said someone's been watching the gate. Music, he waited for the truck to be gone. How long ago did it come through? About an hour. I found it when I logged into the county portal to check something else. I have the deed, Darnell said. The original and the will and the promissory note and the development scheme, the whole picture. A silence. A different kind of silence than before. The silence of someone who has been calculating variables all day and has just received the one that changes the equation. All of it, Camille said. All of it, Darnell. I know he has no basis with the original deed on the record. A quiet title action dies at preliminary review if the ownership chain is clear. I know, I'm going to Haynes now. He can have the county attorney file a response today. Deed and will as exhibits. When's the preliminary review? I don't know yet. Haynes will know. A pause. Keep pulling the records, Darnell said. Everything you have on all 14 families already done. I have 12 transactions fully documented. Still working on the last 2. Have it ready. A breath on the other end. Then drive careful. She ended the call. Darnell drove north. The valley opened up both sides. The hills he'd grown up looking at. The angle of mid-morning light on the western ridge that he'd seen 10,000 times before he was old enough to know he was memorizing it. He thought about Pewitt watching the driveway, waiting for the truck to disappear. The same patients his father had identified 39 months before the accident and tried to address through proper channels. The same patients that had moved on the property 19 days after a funeral. The same patients that had waited 10 years for a son who never came home and then moved again the moment that son showed up and said no. Darnell pressed the accelerator down another degree. Haynes' office 40 minutes north. He set both folders on Hans's desk and sat down. Haynes opened the primary folder, read without speaking. His face stayed level, the composure of someone who has trained himself to receive information before responding to it. But his jaw tightened when he reached the promissory note. A small tension at the hinge. There and gone. It came back when he reached the development agreement. He read that one twice. Then he said everything down and was quiet. 14 families, he said. Camille Washington found them. She's been at the county records office for 2 days. She may have more before tonight. Haynes looked at the promissory note again. The date, the amount, the chain of extension letters ending in Thomas Aldine's final demand. 13 months and the break service was 4 days before. He knew you were going to find this eventually. Haynes said once you showed up, once you didn't take the offer, he knew the clock was running. So he filed first this morning. Darnell said while I was in Savannah, quiet title action. Court-ordered review. Haynes picked up the fake sign from the corner of his desk where it had been sitting since that morning. Looked at it briefly, set it back down. With the original deed on the record, the quiet title action has no basis. He either didn't know you had it or he was betting you didn't know what to do with it. What's the timeline? Preliminary review. I can find out in the next hour, but with this, he touched the deed. I'll have the county attorney file a response today. Deed and will as exhibits. The review becomes a formality and the fraud, longer road, opening an investigation, pulling the old accident records, finding vicers, that takes time, process. Cooperation from the state. He paused, but it starts with what you've brought me today. This is real material, not a feeling, not a broken chain. Darnell nodded. He'll know, Haynes said. When we respond to the filing, when the deed lands in the county record, he'll understand what you've got. He may do something reactive. Reactive would be better than patient, Darnell said. Patient is what he's been for 15 years. Music Haynes almost smiled. The corner of his mouth moved. He slid the second accordion folder across the desk. I'll have the response filed before 5, he said. Darnell was halfway back to the truck when his phone rang again. Camille, first ring. I still at the records office, she said. I found something else. Tell me it's not 14 families. A pause, not dramatic. The pause of someone who has been staring at numbers all afternoon and needs a breath before saying the last ones. It's 17 going back 22 years. 5 of them lost their properties entirely. Not just equity, everything. 2 more are still carrying debt they can't trace the origin of. She stopped. Then all 17 transactions run through the same entity. Different names, music, same principles. Darnell stood beside the truck with his hand on the door handle. 22 years, Darnell. Her voice shifted, still controlled, but the flatness had something in it now. Not quite emotion. The moment when someone who processes everything through analysis arrives at something the analysis can't fully contain. This started before we were born, what he did to your parents. It wasn't the first time. It wasn't close to the first music time. The parking lot outside Hans's office. A quiet Wednesday afternoon in Carver County. Everything going about its ordinary business on the other side of the lot. Come home when you're done, Darnell said before dark, she said. She ended the call. Darnell stood there another moment. 17 families, 22 years of the same scheme, the same patience, the same language built to take from people who trusted that what they were signing meant what it appeared to mean. His father had seen it, had refused, had tried to address it through proper channels with a demand letter, and an expectation that the system would work if you gave it the right materials. His mother had gone further, had assembled the evidence, had driven to Savannah alone, and left everything with a man she trusted because she understood that careful wasn't always enough. That sometimes what was coming at you had patience and resources and time, and the only answer to that was to prepare something that could outlast you if it needed to. Darnell got in the truck, drove north toward the farm. Music he came through the front door, and Ja was there coming out of the kitchen with a dish towel over her shoulder and the look of a person who needs information fast and doesn't want to perform the needing. Did you get it? All of it. Deed, will the debt, the development fraud, the whole picture. She let out one breath, short, sharp, like she'd been holding it since 4:40 that morning. Haynes is filing the response today. Preliminary review Thursday. She said, you checked. Camille texted me an hour ago with the deed on the record. The quiet title action dies at review. The fraud investigation is a longer road, but it opens. Deja held his eyes for a moment, then turned back toward the kitchen. Dinner in 20 minutes, she said, which was exactly the right response. Not a celebration, not a long discussion about what it all meant. Just we keep moving, we eat, we do the next thing. Miss Alois appeared from the hallway, looked at Darnell's face once. Good, she said. Then Theo found 2 more caterpillars during afternoon patrol. He's named them. I won't tell you what he named them. You'll find out at dinner and you need to be prepared. Darnell looked at the ceiling briefly. How many total now? 4. Tell him 4 is the limit and they move outside by the weekend. They're field caterpillars. They belong in the field. Miss Alois turned back down the hallway. 4 is the limit, she called, and they move outside by the weekend. From somewhere in the back of the house, muffled but perfectly clear. What if one of them is small? Darnell walked into the kitchen. The wood stove was going. Something on the stove smelled like onions and slow heat. Deja was at the counter. Back to him, the dish towel over her shoulder. Not talking, not needing to fill the air. He sat down at the table, pulled his father's notebook out of his jacket pocket, set it on the table, looked at it for a long moment. His father had been a careful man, not cautious, careful. There's a difference. Cautious people avoid things. Careful people pay attention to them. Thomas Aldine had paid attention to everything. Noted the date a hinge started squeaking. Noted the first frost and the last frost and what the difference meant for planting. Noted when a neighboring farm changed hands and what that meant for the shared drainage ditch. He had noticed Raymond Pewitt. He had noticed something wrong about Raymond Pewitt, and he had written it down at the back of a $2 hardware store notebook, and put the notebook in a box under a floorboard because he understood that careful wasn't always enough. That sometimes you needed something more when the thing coming at you was patient and had been patient for a very long time. Darnell closed the notebook. Outside, the backfield was going gold in the late afternoon light. The greenhouse warm behind the house. The seedlings inside doing the slow, patient work of becoming things. Everything his parents had built. Everything Deja and Camille and Miss Alois had kept alive. Everything that had waited one way or another for someone to come back and take it seriously. He was back. He'd taken it seriously. Thursday morning, the preliminary review, 2 days. He slipped the notebook back into his jacket pocket. Then Theo came in at full speed from the back hallway, spotted Darnell at the table, and stopped. I need to tell you about the caterpillars, Theo said. Very seriously, I've been informed, Darnell said. Did they tell you the names? No. Theo's expression shifted into the look of someone delivering important news. The new ones are called Deputy and Evidence. Darnell looked at the table for a moment. Evidence, he said, because he's important. That's a pause, that's actually appropriate. Theo nodded satisfied, went to find Biscuit, and from the stove, without turning around, Deja made a sound. Small, quiet. A laugh she was keeping to herself, which she didn't quite manage. Wednesday night, nobody slept much, not really. Darnell lay on the cot in the back room and looked at the ceiling and listened to the house settle around him, the wood stove ticking down, the wind coming low across the south field. Biscuit breathing slow and even on the floor beside him. Tomorrow morning. The preliminary review was at 9:00. He'd been in rooms like that before. Not courtrooms exactly, but rooms where something official was being decided, and the outcome depended on what you walked in with. He knew how to sit still in those rooms. He knew how to keep his face from doing things he didn't want it to do. What he didn't know was how to sit still with this particular thing, because this wasn't a mission briefing. This wasn't a debrief after something that had gone wrong in a way that had a name and a report number and a chain of command to absorb it. This was his parents. This was Highway 16 in December. This was a man who had been patient for 22 years and had nearly won because the one person who was supposed to some come home had spent 10 years not coming. Darnell pressed the back of his hand against his mouth. Let it move through. Just breathe. Music, just let it move. He lowered his hand, looked at the ceiling, thought about his father at a kitchen table somewhere in this house, writing a final demand letter to a man who owed him money and meant him harm. Writing it, carefully mailing it. Trusting that doing the right thing through proper channels would be enough, and his mother driving to Savannah alone, not telling Thomas sitting across from Wendell Okafor in that second-floor office music, and laying everything on the table and saying, "Hold this for my son. He'll come when he's ready." He picked up the notebook from the windowsill, held it, didn't open it, just held it. Outside, through the window, the Georgia night was doing what it does, wide and dark and full of stars. The south fence line he'd repaired, invisible in the dark, but there holding straight. The greenhouse warm between its layers of plastic. The chickens quiet in their coop, his father's land, his mother's kitchen. A boy named Theo, sleeping in the next room with 4 caterpillars in a mason jar on his windowsill. 2 of them named Deputy and Evidence. Darnell set the notebook back on the windowsill, closed his eyes, didn't sleep for another hour. But eventually, morning came hard and fast the way important mornings do. No gentle build-up, just dark and then the alarm on his phone at 5:15 and Biscuit already on his feet with an expression that communicated clearly that today was not a regular day, and he knew it and was ready. Music. Darnell showered, dressed, jacket, the one with the notebook in the inside pocket, his father's watch on his wrist, crystal cracked in one corner, leather strap repaired with electrical tape because the tape worked fine. He came to the kitchen at 6. Deja was already there. Of course she was, coffee going, eggs in the pan. She was wearing a dark blue sweater he hadn't seen before, hair down, and she moved through the kitchen without wasted motion, just getting things done because they needed doing. She didn't say good morning. She handed him a plate. He sat down. Camille appeared from the hallway, folder under her arm, already dressed, hair pulled back. She sat across from Darnell, opened the folder, slid a single sheet toward him. 17 families, she said, fully documented. Every transaction, every property, every name. She tapped the bottom of the page. Sandra Ose has already received the preliminary package from Haynes. She reviewed it last night. You spoke to her. Haynes did. He called me at 9:00 to confirm. Darnell looked at the sheet. 17 names, 22 years. She knows what she's looking at. He said she's been the county attorney for 11 years. She's seen land fraud before. She hasn't seen it at this scale. A pause. She knows exactly what she's looking at. Miss Alois came in from the back hallway with Theo on her heels, still in his pajamas. Oven mitt already on one hand. I'm ready, Theo announced. Everyone looked at him. For what? DJ said support patrol. During the hearing, you're not going to the hearing. Theo processed this. Then I'll hold down the farm. That would be very helpful, Darnell said. Theo nodded. Accepted the assignment with the gravity it deserved. Miss Alois caught Darnell's eye over Theo's head. That look of hers, the one she'd been giving rooms for 31 years of teaching second grade. The one that saw everything and chose carefully what to address. She gave him a small nod. Just that, just go, you're ready, we've got things here. Darnell finished his coffee, stood up, picked up his jacket. DJ walked him to the door, not to the truck, just to the door. Whatever happens in there, she said, I know, no, listen. She looked at him straight at him. Whatever happens in there, you came back, you found it, you did every part of this that needed doing. She paused. Your parents did the work first, but you came back to finish it. That's not nothing. Darnell looked at her for a moment. She wasn't asking him to say anything. She'd said what she needed to say, and now she was just there, standing in the doorway of the house she'd kept alive for 5 years. I'll be back before dark, he said. I know you will. He walked to the truck. The Carver County Courthouse was 3 buildings east of Haynes' office on the same street. Brick, 1930s construction, steps worn smooth in the center from decades of feet. A lobby that smelled like old carpet and the particular patience of a place where official things happen at official speeds. Haynes was already inside when Darnell arrived. He stood when Darnell came through the door. Short nod, the nod of a man who has done what he said he would do and is ready for whatever comes next. County Attorney Sandra Oce was at the table. Files open, organized in the way of someone who had reviewed everything the previous evening and arrived this morning with a complete picture and a clear plan. She was 43, the kind of professional composure that doesn't perform itself. It's just there like a load-bearing wall. You only notice it when you lean against it and it holds. She looked at Darnell when he sat down. Mr. Aldine, I've reviewed the full document package. A pause. I want you to know what we're walking in with the original deed and will establish unambiguous ownership with no gaps in the chain. The promissory note and demand letter establish motive. The development agreement establishes a pattern. Together, the quiet title action has no legal basis, and Judge Warren will see that in approximately the first 10 minutes. And after that, she said carefully, we are in a different conversation. One that takes longer, but one that starts today, Darnell nodded. Then Pewitt walked in blue suit, dark slacks, those shoes. He came through the door with his attorney, a younger man, mid-30s, who carried his briefcase with the careful confidence of someone who had been told this morning was straightforward and had believed it. Pewitt Darnell spoke. Pewitt took his seat on the other side of the table, music, set his hands flat on the surface, composed, unhurried. The posture of a man who had been in rooms like this before and knew how to appear like he belonged in them. The smile still there, but working harder than it had in Darnell's driveway. The effort showing at the edges in a way it hadn't that day. Because that day, Pewitt had held all the information. Music he'd known about the tax delinquency. He'd known the son had been gone 10 years. He'd calculated that the documents from an estate handled by a firm now long dissolved would be slow to surface, if they surfaced at all. He'd been betting on bureaucratic friction. He'd been betting on absence. He'd been wrong about what Darnell had been doing in Savannah. Judge Miriam Warren entered at 859, 62 years old, silver locks pinned back, reading glasses on a chain. She had the manner of someone who had seen most things courts produce, and had developed over the years a precise and unforgiving ability to tell the difference between a legitimate dispute and a manufactured one. She sat, looked at the room. We're here on a quiet title action filed by the Pewitt Land Group claiming disputed ownership of parcel 7703 Aldine Road, Carver County. She opened the file in front of her. Miss Oy, you filed a response on behalf of the recorded title holder. Yes, Your Honor. With exhibits, O.C. stood, placed the documents on the bench. The original deed, the will, the full documentation of unbroken ownership from original purchase to the present day. The tax delinquency, she noted, was in the process of being resolved within the 30-day statutory window. Judge Warren looked at the documents, read without speaking, asked 2 procedural questions, both directed at O.C. Both answered in under 30 seconds. Then she looked at Pewitt's attorney, counsel. Pewitt's attorney leaned slightly forward. Your Honor, we may wish to withdraw the action pending further review of the presented. I'll make that determination, Judge Warren said. She went back to the documents. The room was quiet. Pewitt's hands were flat on the table. Darnell watched them 4 minutes. Then Judge Warren looked up. The quiet title action filed by the Pewitt Land Group is dismissed. She set her pen down. Ownership of parcel 7703 Aldine Road is confirmed as Darnell Thomas Aldine, uncontested. She looked at O.C. Miss O.C., I understand there are additional matters pertaining to historical land transactions in Carver County currently under review. Yes, Your Honor. We anticipate further filings in the coming weeks. Judge Warren nodded once. I'll look forward to them. She rose. The room began to move. Oy gathered her files. Haynes caught Darnell's eye across the table with a look that carried more than any summary could. And then Darnell looked at Pewitt because he needed to see it. Pewitt was looking at the deed, the original, lying on the table where O.C. had placed it as an exhibit, his parents' signatures at the bottom, his mother's handwriting, that forward tilt, the left hook on the T's. His father's more deliberate printing, the careful letters of a man who had taught himself to write clearly two signatures on a piece of paper. Everything Pewitt had been working around for 10 years. Darnell watched him look at it, and he saw the precise moment, the moment when the calculation completed. When Pewitt understood not just that today was lost, but that the position he'd been building for 22 years had been systematically taken apart by a chain of careful people. A father who refused to sign, a mother who kept records, an old attorney who kept faith, a son who finally came home. No dramatic reaction, no raised voice, just a man sitting very still while something internal reorganized itself into a shape he hadn't planned for. The smile was gone, completely gone. What was left in its place was just a face, an ordinary middle-aged face, no longer performing anything, no longer needing to. Darnell picked up the deed, held it for a moment, slid it back into the folder. He didn't say anything to prove it. There was nothing to say. He walked out of the courthouse into the morning light. He sat on the front steps for a moment, just sat. The street in front of him, cars going by. The ordinary Thursday morning in Carver County going about its business like it always had. He pressed one hand flat against his knee, breathed once, then he stood up. Called hands. One ring, it's done. Darnell said, I know, O.C. called me from the parking lot. A pause. The particular quiet of a man setting something down he's been carrying a long time. The fraud investigation opens formally this afternoon. I spoke with the state's office this morning. They want everything. Camille has the full package. 17 transactions all documented. Good. She can bring it to O.C. directly. I'll let her decide. She put it together. That's fair. Haynes was quiet for a moment. Your father kept records because he believed someone would eventually use them. Your mother made sure they'd survived long enough. A pause. Both of them did their part. Darnell looked at the road ahead. The turn onto Aldine Road visible from here. Are you staying? Haynes asked. 4 words, simple. Darnell looked at the fence line visible from the street. The new post still pale wood against the weathered gray of the others. The oak tree at the driveway entrance bare-branched in the early spring cold, but undeniably alive. Root system going deep into ground his family had owned for 26 years. Yeah, he said. Haynes said good and hung up. He stopped at the diner on Cedar Street on the way back. He hadn't planned to, but he'd been thinking about the name at the bottom of Camille's list since the night she'd spread those papers across the kitchen table. And the diner was right there on the main street, and he had Ockhafer's card in his jacket pocket. And some things you just do them. The diner was half full at mid-morning, the kind of place that never fully empties, coffee always going. Pie under a glass dome on the counter. A television in the corner showing the morning news with the sound turned low. A woman came out of the kitchen carrying 2 plates. 52, medium height, natural hair gone mostly silver. She moved with the economy of someone who has been on their feet for long shifts for many years and has found a way to get everything done without wasting anything. She set the plates down at a corner table. Turned, saw Darnell. The way people see strangers in small towns, a quick professional read, not impolite, just the assessment that says, not from here. Or, haven't seen you before, she came to the counter. What can I get you? Coffee, Darnell said, and are you Rita Eccles? She went still. Not alarmed, not defensive, just still. The stillness of someone who has had their name said in unexpected places before and has learned to wait before reacting. Whose music? Asking. My name is Darnell Aldine. My parents were Thomas and Janet Aldine. They owned the farm on Aldine Road. Something moved in her face. "I know that farm," she said quietly. "I know you do. I know your family had land in this county." He paused. "I know you lost it." She looked at him for a long moment. Then she poured the coffee without being asked and set it in front of him and stood on her side of the counter with both hands flat on the surface. "8 years ago," she said, "I made every payment, Music, every single one. The development revenue they promised, it never came. And then the bank said I was in default and I didn't understand how. And I couldn't afford an attorney to find out how. And by the time I understood what had happened, there wasn't anything left to fight for." "There might be now," Darnell said. He took Ockhapper's card out of his jacket pocket, set it on the counter between them. "This is an attorney named Wendell Ockhaffer. He's in Savannah. He's been holding documents related to the development scheme that cost you your land. He's been waiting for the right time to use them." Darnell looked at her. "The fraud investigation opened this morning. Officially, Music, the county attorney has the full package. 17 families, 22 years. Rita looked at the card. Her hands on the counter were steady, but her jaw was working through something. The movement of a person who has kept a particular feeling folded up for 8 years and is in the presence of the first moment it has anywhere Music to go. 17 families, she said. 17. She picked up the card, held it, didn't look at Darnell when she spoke next. "Your parents," she said. "What happened to them? We're working on that too." She nodded, looked at the card one more time. Then she looked at him, and what was in her face wasn't exactly gratitude. It was something older and more complicated than gratitude. The expression of someone who has been told for 8 years by circumstances, by outcomes, by the silence of a system that moved on without her, that what happened to her didn't matter enough to address and has just been told otherwise. "Thank you," she said. "Call him," Darnell said. He left the coffee money on the counter, walked out into the mid-morning light. He stood on the sidewalk for a moment, not moving, just standing in the ordinary Thursday morning that had turned into something else. 17 families, 22 years. His father had tried to stop it the right way. His mother had prepared the evidence to stop it after he couldn't. And now, a woman named Rita Eccles was standing behind a diner counter holding a business card. And somewhere, a state investigation was opening files on a man who had been patient for 2 decades and had finally run out of time. Darnell walked to the truck, got in, drove north toward home. He was back at the farm by noon, came through the front door. DJ appeared from the kitchen, dish towel over her shoulder, reading his face in approximately 1 second. "Done," he said. "Dismissed. Ownership confirmed." She let out one breath. Short, sharp. The kind that comes after you've been holding something since 4:40 in the morning. And finally, the reason to hold it is gone. Haynes is feeling the fraud investigation this afternoon. The state wants the full package. "Camille, I'll bring it." Camille said she was already at the kitchen table, laptop open, folder organized and labeled beside it. She looked up at Darnell. 17 families, she said. "I know Rita Eccles. I stopped at the diner. I gave her Ockhaffer's card." Camille was quiet for a moment. "Then your mother saved all of this. She saved the materials. You built the case." She considered that, accepted it, turned back to her laptop. Miss Alois appeared from the hallway. One look at the room. "Good," she said. "Then Theo has been on support patrol since 7 this morning. He found something near the south fence he classifies as significant, and he's been waiting very patiently to brief you." Darnell looked at the ceiling briefly. "Tell him I'll debrief in 10 minutes. He'll want it in 5. Tell him 10. Miss Alois walked back down the hallway. 10 minutes, she called from the back of the house, muffled but perfectly clear. "Fine, but it's very significant." The significant finding, it turned out, was a very large beetle which Theo had named Sargent. "Sargent is staying outside," Darnell said. Obviously, Theo said, slightly offended that this needed saying. That evening they paid the taxes, a practical thing. An online transaction, a form filled out, a payment submitted, a confirmation number appearing on a screen, bureaucratic, unremarkable, except the balance had been sitting there for 10 years, growing, patient in its own way, waiting for someone to come back and deal with it. And now Camille typed in the payment information and paused with her fingers on the keyboard and looked at Ja. Deed looked at Darnell. Darnell nodded. Camille submitted. The confirmation appeared on the screen. Payment received. Balance cleared, account current. The three of them looked at it for a moment, just a moment. Then Theo came in from the back hallway in his socks, having apparently been listening from around the corner with the subtlety of a 5-year-old, which is to say none at all. He looked at the laptop screen, looked at his mother, looked at Darnell, looked at the screen again. He climbed onto his chair, stood up on it. "We won the tax battle," he announced. And Miss Alois, who had appeared in the kitchen doorway with a dish towel, burst out laughing. Not a small laugh, not a polite, contained laugh. The real version, the kind that takes over your whole body and makes you need to find something to hold on to. She reached for the counter, and then simply decided the floor was fine and sat down on it. Back against the cabinets, laughing in a way that had clearly been building for a while, maybe for 5 years, maybe longer, which made Camille laugh, which came out of her face in a way that visibly surprised even Camille. She covered her mouth, gave up covering it, let it happen, depressed both hands over her face. Her shoulders were shaking. Biscuit stood up from his spot by the refrigerator, looked at each person in the room in sequence, decided this was acceptable, sat back down. Darnell stood in the doorway, Miss Alois on the kitchen floor laughing. Camille with tears tracking down her face, trying to explain to a confused Theo why the tax battle was funny, which it wasn't exactly, except that it was. DJ with both hands still over her face, her whole body shaking with something that had been held in for 30 days or possibly much longer than that. His father's house, his mother's kitchen. Music, the people his mother had somehow known without knowing their names or their story, would come had told him to look at before he decided anything. He pressed the back of his hand against his mouth, breathed music, once. Let it stay and let it move at the same time. Both were allowed. Though, he said, Theo looked down at him from the chair, completely serious about the tax battle. Good call, Darnell said. Theo nodded. I know. Miss Alois started laughing again from the floor. They ate outside that evening. Miss Alois had pushed for it, and nobody had the energy to argue. And it turned out, as it generally did when Miss Alois pushed for something, that she was right. 3 extra trips for chairs, a folding table from the barn, 2 wooden crates serving as overflow surface. The result was structurally improbable and entirely comfortable. The backfield at dusk, the sky doing its evening sequence, orange, music, then rose, then the deep blue that comes just before the stars. Cornbread that Thea ate with a dedication bordering on spiritual bean soup. The fire pit going more for the company of it than the warmth. Though the warmth didn't hurt, Theo updated Darnell on the afternoon patrol in full detail. 2 hawks over the east field. 1 suspicious pile of rocks near the drainage ditch that turned out upon investigation to be a regular pile of rocks, and Sergeant the Beetle, who had been relocated to the base of the oak tree and was thriving in his new position. Sergeant is a good name. Darnell said Theo considered this music. He earned it. He said after the dishes were cleared, Theo arranged himself in Miss Alois's lap with the bird book across both of them and was asleep before the 3rd page. Miss Alois looked down at him, then out at the field, didn't move. Camille was inside already, laptop open, working on the next thing, because Camille didn't stop. That was simply who she was, and it was exactly right for who she was. Which left Darnell and Duh at the porch railing, not arranged there. Just both arriving at the same place at the same time because there was nowhere else that made more sense. The field in front of them. The tree line at the far end going dark. The first stars coming out over the eastern ridge. The north room, Darnell said. Deja looked at him. It hasn't been used since I got here. Needs work. New subfloor in the corner. Window resealed. But it's a room. She waited. My mother's letter said fill the house. He looked at the field. I've been thinking about what that actually means, not abstractly. Concretely, what does it mean? It means a room for someone who needs it, not a shelter, not a program, a real place for a while. For someone who's run out of road, he paused. The way you ran out of road, Deja was quiet for a moment. Miss Alois would want to help with that, she said. Camille would set up a system, rules intake. She'd say it was for practical reasons. She'd be right that it needs rules. Theo would give everyone a patrol assignment. The corner of her mouth moved and you'd fix whatever was broken. That's the part I know how to do. She was looking at the field. The way she looked at the greenhouse when she was working out what it needed. Not just seeing what was there, seeing what it could hold. Okay, she said, just that. 2 letters, but the weight in them. The weight of something decided between 2 people who had stopped needing ceremony to make things real. Darnell turned toward her slightly. Not much. Enough. I didn't come here for this, he said. I know, I came because I had no other direction. That's usually how it works. Her voice was quiet. You think I turned up Aldine Road on purpose? I was 23 years old. It was November. I needed somewhere to park. That was all I was doing. He thought about that. 23 years old. Camille's car, November in Georgia, cold without drama and not apologizing for it, driving up a road she'd never been on, finding a farmhouse with every window dark, staying because staying was the only move left. My mother knew someone would come. He said she knew this house had room for it. She knew more than that. He looked at the field. She wrote it in the letter, said, if you find someone already there, look at them before you decide anything. Deja was quiet. I looked, he said. She turned toward him the same small degree. Enough, I know you did, she said. He looked at her. Not the careful measuring look he'd been using since he arrived, the sideways kind with distance built into it, straight at her. The way you look at someone when you've stopped calculating the gap. I'm staying, he said, present tense, not a decision announced. A fact reported to someone who had earned the reporting. She held his eyes. I know, she said, and didn't move away from where she was standing. And he didn't move away from where he was standing. And the field was dark and wide in front of them. And the stars were coming out one by one over the eastern ridge. And the house behind them was warm and full and making its small sounds. That was it. That was the whole of it. No ceremony, no announcement, just 2 people standing at the railing of a farmhouse porch in Georgia in early spring. Having arrived here by completely different roads and deciding without making a production of it that this was where the road ended and that the ending was fine more than fine. Inside, Miss Alois turned to Paige. Music. Theo shifted in her lap, still deeply asleep, and said something that might have been Caterpillar. Miss Alois looked down at him. 68 years old. She had thought when the classroom was gone and her brother was gone and the apartment was gone, that she was at the end of the useful portion of her life. Not dramatically, just in the quiet way that comes when the shape of your days loses its form and you can't reconstruct it from what remains. She had come here because Ja had offered a room and a seat at the table. She had stayed because of a boy who needed someone to sit beside him every evening with a book, because that was the thing she knew how to give, and he was the thing that needed it. She looked at the bird book open on Theo's chest, music, the page on hawks, the one he'd had her read 3 times that week. She looked at the house around her, the wood stove, the mismatched chairs from 4 different sources that somehow worked together, the wild flowers in the coffee can on the counter that Theo had picked from the south field 3 days ago. Music, 'cause he decided the kitchen needed them. The sound of a house being lived in, not endured, not merely survived, actually lived in by people who had chosen it and kept choosing it. Miss Alois Carter, former 2nd grade teacher. Music, current resident of a farmhouse that had been kept alive by stubbornness and need, and the grace of people who show up for each other without being asked. Sat in her chair with a sleeping 5-year-old on her lap, and felt for the first time in a long time that she was exactly where she was supposed to be, which was enough. More than enough. It was the whole thing. Darnell stood at the railing a moment longer. Biscuit padded out from inside and came to lean lightly against his leg, looking out at the dark field. Tomorrow there would be more fence to check. The north room needed a new subfloor. Music, Rita Eccles needed to call Aquifer. The fraud investigation was open and the road ahead was long and none of it was going to be simple. But tonight the field was dark and wide and full of quiet. Tonight the house was warm behind him, and that was enough. He looked at the fence line he'd repaired, holding straight in the dark the oak tree at the driveway entrance, shaped by wind and years into something that looked exactly like what it was. A tree that had been here a long time and intended to keep being here. He thought about his father writing a final demand letter and trusting the process. He thought about his mother driving to Savannah alone and leaving everything that mattered with a man she barely knew but trusted completely. He thought about a boy with a wooden rifle and red nail polish who had defended this house before Darnell even knew it needed defending. He thought about a woman who had read every library book about greenhouse insulation because losing half her seedlings to cold was a problem she intended to solve. He pressed his hand flat on the railing, felt the wood under his palm, rough, weathered, repaired in one section with newer wood that didn't quite match. Jaws' repair second winter she was here. It held solid. He'd come back later than he should have a decade later. And the house had been here. The people in it had kept it alive. His mother had kept the documents safe. His father had written the warning in the back of a $2 notebook and left it where it would survive. Everything had waited for him. For whenever he was ready, he was ready. He was here. And for the first time in 10 years, standing on the porch of the house where he grew up with biscuit warm against his leg and the Georgia stars doing what they do above the fields. Darnell Aldine let his shoulders drop, let himself be finally completely exactly here because the road had ended here and the ending was not what he'd expected. It was not ruin. It was not grief standing alone in an empty house. It was not 10 years of absence pressing down into nothing. It was this. 5 people and a dog and a mason jar of caterpillars on a windowsill. A boy who had defended this farm with a wooden rifle before he was old enough to understand what he was defending. A woman who had built a greenhouse out of salvaged lumber and library books. A retired school teacher who had sat down on a kitchen floor and laughed until she needed the wall. A mother who had known. A father who had prepared. And a son who had finally come home. Darno stayed.